Mr. Chattil, you have up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm Mark Chattillo. I'm here on behalf of the Gaviota Coast Conservancy. I was hoping I'd have a few more minutes to cover two main points. The Gaviota Coast Conservancy is very concerned about the continuation of the use of the Tajiguas landfill on the Gaviota Coast. It was never a good site for a landfill. As a coastal canyon, it's experienced groundwater contamination. It has gone through a number of modernization steps, and it was the Board of Supervisors in 1999 that committed that Tajiguas landfill would be closed in 15 years. Public Works staff took that to be 15 years of capacity, apropos of your question, and here we are 15 years later with a proposed recovery project that's going to be sited on top of that landfill. So the first issue I'd like to ask your council to address is a commitment that it's time to look beyond Tajiguas. This project may or may not go ahead, but as we look ahead for the next 15 or 20 years, it's incumbent upon the city of Santa Barbara as a leader in our environmental community in Santa Barbara to find a better solution than dumping our trash in a coastal canyon on the Gaviota Coast. So that's we're going to ask to make the same request to the Board of Supervisors, but the city's support for that goal would be much appreciated. Turning to the project before you, you're asked to sign a 22-year commitment to put or pay for the facility, which is, in our view, a problematic and highly risky endeavor. There are two mandates that I find it's important to consider separately as you analyze. One is to enhance and increase the diversion. These are state mandates for cities to increase the amount of solid waste diversion. And also there's a new mandate concerning organic waste. And they're both addressed by this project, but they're actually solvable in different ways. There are several risks from the project, and I addressed some of them in my letter and identified some of the questions that we felt needed to be answered in order for the council to be informed in its decision as to whether to proceed with this process. I'm going to focus on the financial risk. First, you've heard about the recycling as being basically the financial backbone to this project. Using a 10-year average, we're good because it's 30% less. That's this year's numbers, and in fact, the recycling market is tanking. It has been tanking for a few years. You may have heard about this fellow, Donald Trump, who doesn't want us to be doing relations with China in the future. China is our sole or principal market for our recycled materials. So if you expect that you're still going to get $9.8 million a year from our future recycling stream, I think that that's probably an unrealistic expectation. I mentioned the organic versus solid waste piece. For organics, which are mandated to be removed, you're going to impose those costs upon businesses. Businesses are not mandated to participate in the city's collection system. They can go out on their own. In fact, they have been doing that. What that's going to mean, as I indicated on the questions, is that your residential customers are going to be paying more for the cost of disposal of the organic waste as you eliminate the more valuable organic component out. And I also would point out that Mr. Trump's affected the bond market, and that's going to substantially increase what we expect currently it's slated to be $80 million in interest for the cost of this project, increasing it to a total of $200 million, and that may well go up. Those factors are leading other communities to leave anaerobic digesters. Now, anaerobic digestion as a technology is heavily subsidized by a very active lobbying effort at the state level that's put this in the forefront of solutions. I think that the 12.7 cents per kilowatt hour available only to anaerobic digestion discloses, it shows the way that this industry has worked their way into being the perfect solution. City of Napa, after having approved an anaerobic digester system, recently decided they're abandoning that, and they're going to a straight composting system for their organic waste. And that's what we encourage as being the alternative that the city should encourage. Source separation, enhanced source separation is part of the way there. A dirty MRF is part of the solution. And then the third piece is a traditional composting system. There's new technologies using forced air that reduce both the odor issues and the footprint area and allow us to ensure that the compost that is created and that the compost created has a quality that's going to actually be accepted by the farmers and by landowners. We are betting on the come that landowners are going to be willing to take the anaerobic digester-derived compost and put it on their lands. What we've been hearing from farmers is, no way. They will make their own compost before they're going to take trash-derived compost and use it on their lands. And this is important if you look at a carbon cycle analysis of a life cycle analysis of the carbon that you're intending to try and resolve and address with this project. The biogas component is going to collect from the digester a portion of the carbon out of the trash and then burn it and send it to the atmosphere, which is exactly not where we don't want it to go. The alternative is a soil compost farming, a carbon farming approach where compost, the critical element, clean compost that agriculturalists and landowners want to put on their property, is applied uniformly over large areas and substantially increase the amount of carbon that's sequestered in the soil. It does not go to the atmosphere, but actually goes to the soil. We would ask that the city show leadership in this, and my time is out, and I have more to say, but it's...
I'll ask a question in that, given how much time and energy this project has taken over many years, if not this, then what? I mean, you know, and you can be brief in that request.
The alternative that we've identified and encouraged, I have to say that the EIR did a great disservice. The county was very clever in their EIR in truncating the alternatives analysis. They relied on the 2002 EIR, which had a whole, probably a dozen or more significant impacts, and they tiered off of that for this project and found there were no new significant impacts. That then gives them the ability legally to avoid a robust alternatives analysis. And so we got a very, very weak alternatives analysis out of the Tajiguas project EIR, this EIR that you're going to be asked to rely on as you look at adopting this ordinance. None of the alternative sites were considered to be feasible, and there wasn't a robust analysis of where the dirty MRF could be sited. I think Councilmember Dominguez's questions are spot on. How can we do this closer to the source, both the source of the trash and the market for the compost that is the end product? How can we use this as a resource rather than just treating it as a waste that we want to send away? And so a dirty MRF located at the David Love Place is one to replace the existing MRF on the city's lands out near the airport would be one component of this solution. A second component is enhanced source separation. And while staff, I'm glad they are using the honest numbers of the 39% diversion ratio, many other jurisdictions don't admit that they really are not diverting 70%. The county's number is substantially higher than 39%, but we all know that's a fake number.
Now you're diversing, so I think we got your point.
The second part of the alternative, the third part, is a composting program, and it could be out at Tajiguas or at Barone Ranch, where you can use a lesser footprint using new technologies, but traditional composting as a way to get there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr.
Ledwig.
We appreciate your looking at this.
Yep.
PowerPoint, yep. So clearly a ton of work, Madam Mayor, City Council members, clearly a ton of work has been done on this. And I have not done the amount of research that Mark has. I did look at some of his work, and I think that it really bears a close look. And just intuitively, this has a strong whiff of the Technofix boondoggle to my sensibility. And the suggestion that Mark had of committing more fully to a soft path, I think, really bears a closer look. That's about all I have to say on that particular piece. I did want to say some more about construction materials. I spoke earlier about the possibility of incorporating in the permitting process for construction a way for the planning department to look at actual performance metrics. And construction is today largely future landfill, and it's something that you can calculate fairly readily, and rather than allowing that cost to be externalized, where these buildings that only have a 60-year lifespan and then are going to go into a God knows where, something much more expensive, that could be there could be a fee-based mechanism to incentivize using more friendly materials. This is clipping off a little bit. This would not only result in less landfill, but probably also cleaner buildings. That's a list of some of the hazardous materials found in construction. Just a reference point on compost quality, I would not want this material anywhere near my garden, the trash compost. So when you see one of these buildings, one of the things to think about is this looks great when it's done, but it's actually future trash. There are alternatives. We'll be requesting that the City Council allow the Planning Department flexibility to permit structures made from high-performance adobe that are non-toxic and almost free of future landfill, for example. So not when it's done, just turns back into mud. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. It's to the council, and this is just a report because the decision is going to be on December 6th, and the subcommittee, we were talking about bringing everyone up to speed, so instead of doing all this and having to vote on it at the same time. So obviously it's very complex, so we did the timing well on this. Mr. Hart?
Well, I appreciate all the work that everybody has done since our last meeting and the committee's work, vetting all these issues. The issues we're hearing today, I think, are similar to what was raised last time. Mr. Chitillo's letter has 6 very precise questions, and given that we have one more whack at this, I'd like to see maybe a written response from staff to these specific issues. I don't think we have time today to go through all 6 of these items in detail, although I think you have answered a lot of these with your presentation and the information that's in front of us. I think where there's always going to be a tension between advancing technology to the next step versus today's problem. And I think it was very clearly said by Mr. Chitillo that we wouldn't have put Tajiguas where we put it today, and yet we have it today. And I live here, we all live here. It's really hard to imagine a site anywhere in the South Coast that would be acceptable to anybody other than this existing site, which is unacceptable too. And that's just the dilemma that we have. And I don't know how to get out of this box. I mean, I've been here for a very long time. County staff has been working on this a very long time. This conversation, as I mentioned in previous hearings, was here in these chambers nearly 20 years ago when Supervisor Gail Marshall went to Germany and brought back the idea that we should be doing something different than having things permanently stored in the landfill. Technology's changed dramatically in that 20 years. It's going to change dramatically in another 20 years. And it's sort of like buying a computer. You can always wait next year and get a better computer for less money. But you need a computer today. We need to do something with the trash that we have today. And I'm not seeing a clear path to a better solution in real terms today. I see it in the future, and I think we're going to try as a city to be involved in that conversation. This is a 20-year agreement. After 20 years, we're going to be in a position to do something differently, and hopefully the technology will have evolved at that point to give us more options. But I understand the tension between using Tajiguas longer than was much longer than is ideal. But I just don't know what else there is to do.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, too, would like to acknowledge, I understand the Gaviota Conservancy. You want the landfill gone. There's also a benefit to our trash generation society that we need that capacity in the landfill. So I'd just like to recognize that. And also, I would like to ask one question out of Mr. Chitillo's letter. Not sure if you had a chance to see it when it came in yesterday. And then also Mr. Lugwood referred to the quality of the compost. Ms. Chitillo's letter says the AD process yields a contaminated compost product that many farmers reject for use on their lands. Would you have a comment about the quality of the compost?
Madam Mayor, council members, yes, there are 2 things that I can say to that. The first is that what we've seen. So when we've gone to the Bay Area and we've talked to the City of San Jose folks, they have demonstrated that taking the organic material out of their trash stream, composting it, and applying it to the fields has been successful. They have found growers to apply this for the benefits of water retention and soil erosion and all those things that we know that compost does. And so they have, again, found the radius of delivery shrink. So they're no longer delivering this out to the Central Valley, they're delivering it to the Bay Area. As a follow-up to that, Mr. Dewey, as part of his own due diligence, collected samples of that same screened material from ZBest, ran analytic profiles on it, and found that it meets all of the state regulations for metals and pathogens and for inert organics, the things like the glass and the plastics. So it can be land applied. If we can screen it, we can land apply it. We know that. It's already been proven up in Northern California. It will take some time. Mr. Dewey will have to work pretty diligently to establish pilot plots and prove to growers, just like they did in Northern California, what the benefits are. But I'm confident that he can do so. The last bit I would add is that the processing of the MRF itself helps to aid the contaminants of concern, to remove those. This organic material is no larger than 2 inches. So that catches things like containers, it catches things like household batteries, and all the things that one might be worried about passing through through the system. This is such a small screen, it's only capturing the organic material and by definition excluding everything else. That, coupled with the follow-up screening, is why we're confident that it can be land applied.
Thank you, Mr. Four. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can you remind me how large this facility is, square foot? I'm thinking, is it 80,000 square feet? Does that sound, that number comes to mind? 138,000 for both the MRF and the anaerobic, the combined. Okay. And I don't remember in the EIR, was the David Love facility location reviewed as an alternate site?
Madam Mayor, it was reviewed as an alternate
For
site.
both MRF and AD, or just the MRF?
Just for the MRF.
But not the AD?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Dominguez.
So my concerns are twofold, and they kind of fall into economics and the environmental. The economics is the price hikes, and taken alone, they may not seem like a huge concern to households, but these households who are, this is going to be a regressive tax, meaning that because it's a fixed rate tax, it impacts the poorest households in Santa Barbara the most. And it's going to be aggregated on top of our water rate hikes, our sales tax hike that may be in the works, electricity rate hikes, whatever hikes that our consumers and residents in Santa Barbara are facing next year. This is just one more thing to tick off on. And looking at the economy, the way it's been growing, the wages for that group haven't really been keeping up with the cost of living increases. All of these are cost of living increases, so it's really going to impact these people a lot. The other impacts are property taxes or rents, depending whether you own or rent. And we haven't been able to successfully do anything about the rents. We've created more expensive housing because we're replacing older buildings with some newer buildings. And this is just going to be one more thing. So I want to see if there's anything we can do to reduce that. If there's a special program that's utility related for households below certain incomes, I'd love to hear about that in a report back. Not only in this context, but if some of these other taxes and fees that I've talked about, the water, if there's something that maybe reduces the aggregate impact, that would be great to know about. In terms of the environmental impact, again, seeing all these trucks still continuing to go up with greenhouse gases, least into the environment doesn't really appease the concern of this program. If this program is primarily, or one of the things is to extend the landfill, but the other one is to reduce the impact on the environment, it seems like we've missed an opportunity maybe to reduce that. The other thing is behaviorally. This doesn't have any incentive programs to change people's behaviors, as far as I can tell. So I'd love to see if there's a way we can nudge people. There's a great book called Nudge by Cass Sunstein that talks about how we can use behavioral economics to get people to make better decisions. Part of it is having stores take back the waste. That's part of the packaging. The amount of packaging in California has just gone through the roof. So if there's a way to incentivize the stores that sell these things to take back the packaging, that encourages them to sell products that use less packaging. And by the same token, if we can get residents to see that the decisions they make is increasing the costs both economically and environmentally, that might cause them to change their behavior. It may cause them to say, hey, let's do some of this processing in town if it'll lower the prices and help the environment. I think we've heard a lot of feedback from Santa Barbara residents. They're willing to do more and act locally. So I'd love to see if we can put that to the test for this.
Okay, well, we have a big decision to make in 2 weeks. I appreciate the thorough presentation, and we'll take it from there. So thank you very much. All right, any council member committee assignment reports?